Right, yeah.
Anyway, then it just goes.
All right, everybody would rise for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. A couple of announcements. First is I guess it's a proclamation that April 26th is Arbor Day. And anything else I need to say about this one, or? Okay.
Nope.
And then checks over $25,000. I think there are three of them. One is to Schultz Ford Lincoln Mercury for the purchase of an F-150 Lightning. Coming from the capital fund, it's roughly $50,616. Another one to Tony Casal,
I think so, yeah.
okay, Inc. For East Sunnyside Lane curb replacement, coming from capital and general fund, is $67,609. And lastly, Those Guys Contracting, curb excavation repair at Circle Drive and Janet Terrace, capital fund, $27,738. Okay, now we're coming to correspondence.
You're gonna summarize?
Yeah, I guess you guys can all take a break because I got quite a few here. The good news is that the first four on the list, I believe I already summarized, so I'm not going to repeat them. With the exception, perhaps, is it Zoe's letter that had the additions to it? Is this the right one? Yes.
Well, yeah, that was the original one, and then she just reported that there were additional.
Exactly. There were a number of additional signatures. I think it was a petition, and this was one in favor of the addressing the deer overpopulation with the bow hunting. And now I'm going to go through what looks like about 25 letters here, as best I can.
I think you should really bottom line it, like, they're in favor of this, they're against that.
I will, that is the plan. See
Okay.
if I can get through this. First, I have to get myself to the letters that I didn't already cover. Okay, Steve Fondiller, is in support of bow hunting, suggesting a fence that would be problematic for predators and other creatures. And Steve Hollowell, and ARB. I want to register support for ARB having responsibility for historic properties outside the historic district with regard to their external appearance. Since we've actually made that change, I'm not going to read the whole letter. And that will be the subject of a subsequent hearing tonight. Let's see, Doug McClure, also on ARB. Doug spoke at the last meeting, but he basically suggested it's premature to propose changes to the ARB process without taking a look at Irvington's approval process as a whole, and that he's working with a small group of local individuals who are discussing these issues. And I'm trying to extract from him the names of those people so we can add them to a committee that we have. We've been calling it informally the Streamlining Committee, but it will look at the overall real estate approval process, which more to be, more coming on that particular issue. Let's see. Carol Sommerfeld, frequent user of the woods. Culling overpopulated deer is the most humane and sound strategy to maintain a healthy ecosystem. Bottom line is she is writing in favor of the bow hunting. Steve Wolfert is in opposition to controlling the deer population through lethal means, suggesting that there are other non-lethal, more humane approaches than culling. Say John Abraham in favor of the bow hunting, pointing out deer are not just a public nuisance, safety concern as well with regard to driving, and suggesting they're a vector for Lyme disease. Maura Gadid strongly supports the Irvington Woods Committee proposal for deer management. The woods is a common asset that benefits the quality of life of taxpayers in the village. And this approach addresses the problem in a way that benefits everyone inside and outside the boundaries of the village. James Haggerty. This is different subject. Irvington Military Tribute Banner Committee. He's asking not for funding, but that the board allows permission to solicit families to purchase a military tribute banner for one of their Irvington veterans to be mounted on poles in Irvington during Veterans Day and Memorial Day. And he states this is not a fundraiser. Any money in the future left over will be donated to Irvington for beautification projects. Currently, New York has 65 communities participating in this veteran tribute banner program, and I think this started in Terrytown. So I think what he's asking for is just that we would be willing to put up the banners. I know that he's reached out to the Boy Scouts because I want to talk to them, and somehow this subject came up, to help him in the fundraising. Anything we need to do as a board, you would suggest, other than?
They did a presentation last year.
Oh, they did?
When Brian-
Is
Yeah,
that the same?
Well, they weren't quite as organized as this. So the previous iteration that you heard was really being driven by a different group of people. It also included some more village involvement in it. But this is really not involving the village, except probably for the actual act of putting up the banner. I don't think we're all that interested in having outside groups put banners up. So that would be our involvement, and to say what our commitment is, that's what our commitment would be.
So do you want to just say that we have no objection to it? Because it's not like I can tell them, other than that we would be willing to put them up if they have them. Obviously, I suppose it'd be nice to confirm that they are like what was previously proposed and not something
They are,
radically
yeah.
different. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think we discussed at the time, the board was more in favor of doing it during specific times, not 12 months a year, but like during, Veterans Day. And
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's sort of
I
what
think
he's
that's part of their
suggesting.
proposal.
I thought so too. That's why I thought it was the same group, because I thought they had taken our note and,
Right.
like people did.
Right.
So-
No, I think he was just paying attention.
So that's good. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'll pass it on.
Let's see, Delina Cody supports the plan put forth by Irvington Woods Committee for Managing Deer in the Irvington Woods. Nature's out of balance, and the Irvington Woods, along with the other natural areas in Irvington, are besieged by hungry deer. She's concerned about the lack of forest regeneration, and the deer population isn't going to reduce itself. Basically, in summary, she states no one's happy that deer hunting is the solution, however, it must be the solution. Let's see. Bard Bounez, my wife and I fully support the proposed bow and arrow deer culling plan. Succinct and much appreciated. I'm not addressing the substance, simply that it's a short letter. Michael Hanna is in favor of the bow hunting, but also asks, could the village work to encourage Columbia University and Mercy University to contribute resources, coordination, and financing to the effort? He sent a photo of, I guess, 12 deer eating on the Columbia Nevis property. So I think he's pointing out that you need to address the global problem. Diane Barella. She's lived here for 50 years, and her immediate family now they're 28. She vehemently objects to the idea of deer hunting in Irvington, and asks that we post the videos from the trail cameras telling me there's 100 deer per square mile. I'm not not sure that was the figure that was mentioned, but before we make a decision, we will ask, I've been actually collecting some information, but we will certainly ask for confirmation of that or seek another way to confirm the numbers, the census that has been established. Let's see, Rona Horowitz-Bard. As a follow-up to the prior letter I sent, on behalf of many residents of the community, please see the attached information. It includes an academic paper from a Yale professor explaining 2 important points regarding his view of information on the same topic for a park in Washington. And those are that there's little evidence that deer are the source of the problem, and the problem being sort of deforestation, and data from other sites cannot simply be applied to the area in question, as there are other variables and factors. Lisa Antonelli, this, different subject than deer. This is the Packaging Reduction Act, and I'm going to make short trip to this letter because it's on our agenda tonight. So we are in favor of it, or supporting it anyway, at the state legislative level. Pierrette Pallone. So they've lived, her family's lived in the school district for more than 15 years. Saddened by the news of the proposed bow hunting strategy and opposed to the idea of such a measure, giving the potential for wounding, heightened suffering, and prolonged death of the animals. But she says she doesn't want her personal feelings to be the focus of the letter. I want to address 3 specific areas of concern: the effectiveness of the proposed measure of deer mitigation in general, importance of community engagement, and the potential risk to public safety. Let's see here. Basically, on the first point, it's noted that we're referred to a particular article, and the author of that article says that long-term success of deer culling hasn't been well documented, and the evidence that's available suggests long-term planning and continued management are essential. And we do recognize that if we make a commitment to do this, it is going to be a long-term commitment if it's going to work. The importance of community engagement. It's my sincere hope the community will take necessary time to assess and consider the current community-wide view of this issue before deciding how or even whether to pursue deer mitigation efforts. I'd suggest the hearing we've had and the continuing discussion we're going to have will do that. Potential risk to public safety. Should lethal strategies ultimately be employed, I have no doubt the village will go to great lengths to make sure the public is kept safe. I think she points out the risk of children, teenagers in particular, hanging out late at night in the woods. We certainly will do whatever is necessary if we go that direction to make sure that it's done safely. Jill Bala, writing to say, let's see, the problem is best solved with the Woods Committee's recommendation of hiring the professional bow hunter, and she acknowledges that this is a rather difficult decision. Melinda Chapelier, I'm writing in support of a professional archer to control the deer population at Irvington Woods. After years of consideration and taxpayer spending, our qualified and trusted employees in the Parks Department and the Woods Committee have reached this conclusion and recommendation, and I agree they found the most effective and financially prudent option. Lisa Marie Antonelli. My family and I have enjoyed living in Irvington since 2011. I'm an animal rights activist and I support the Irvington Woods proposal to use a bow hunter. The deer are eating everything because they are starving. Letting them starve to death seems even more cruel than bow hunting. She appreciates that the meat will be harvested to feed those in need. Ann Jaffe Holmes. Let's see here. Thank you for holding the hearing. I want want to state that I fully support and endorse the deer management program recommended by the Irvington Woods Committee, i.e. scientifically based, carefully managed, surgically orchestrated program using a single professional expert archer with significant experience working in a suburban woodland and proven 100% safety record. She notes that this has been proven to be successful in allowing natural restoration of ecological diversity in other communities. Will reestablish balance in our woods, protecting the diversity of species rather than allowing any one species to dominate and destroy others. Phil Whitney, thanks for hosting the deer discussion on March 21. I've been an Irvington resident for 45 years. I've watched the decline of the Irvington woods. And the decline in its diversity, undergrowth, and animal habitat. He's writing to implore us to be decisive implementing a deer management solution is a necessity today, not tomorrow. Lori Horowitz. Actually, it looks like Lawrence and Evelyn Horowitz. We write to oppose the proposal by the Irvington Woods Committee. We do not believe their plan to kill deer is sufficiently supported by science. To take such an extreme measure without adequate reassurance of success is hasty and irresponsible. Christina D. Respiris. In regard to the proposed deer cull, I'm reaching out to implore you to only use humane methods like deer contraception, proper fencing, etc., and to compassionately avoid slaughter, especially bow hunting. Killing's never the answer and will not remedy the situation long term. Let's see. This is a letter from PETA, Joan Kellenbens, largest animal protection organization. We understand the board and the Woods Committee are actively discussing deer control initiatives. Respectfully, we must advise that bow hunting is among the cruelest forms of killing, with bow hunters routinely spending hours tracking the blood trails of wounded animals. Many victims are lost, and their deaths are slow and agonizing. Lethal initiatives tear wild families apart. Even the use of sharpshooters using firearms would be far less cruel than bow hunting. Please see PETA's Deer Control pamphlet for more information. Let's see. Arlene Zuckerman. Please stop the bow hunt of deer. Avoid lethal activity in favor of humane consideration and decency. Bow hunting is barbaric and a slow, painful death for any animal. Rona Horowitz. Let's see. Bard. Please accept this updated letter in strong opposition to the proposal by the Irvington Woods Committee to reduce the deer population via bow hunting. And it addresses particular arguments that were made by the Woods Committee. One, deer are causing the inevitable demise of the Irvington Woods and reducing their population would save the woods. The letter notes the evidence is dubious as to whether the deer are indeed the cause of invasive plants, which per Irvington Woods is the problem since native species cannot survive when invasive species are present. And there is a reference to a Humane Society document. There is evidence that making the deer disappear will not make the invasive plants disappear. Deer, second point, deer carry ticks causing Lyme disease. There's scientific evidence that other animals also carry ticks, including chipmunks and birds, and that mice, not deer, can contract and spread Lyme disease. Logically, reducing the number of deer will increase the number of ticks on other animals, including those that actually contract Lyme disease. Even the CDC cannot recommend reducing deer populations and needs to prevent Lyme disease. Deer invade people's backyards, eat plants and flowers, disrupt children's play areas, leave their excrement, bring ticks, and we need to significantly decrease their population. Again, these are the points made that she's addressing. Killing the deer in the Irvington Woods will not reduce the deer in people's backyards. A fence in one's backyard will. Deer are lured by exotic plants in their search for food. Fencing the woods is an ongoing expense for upkeep and repair, and killing deer is the only option to save the woods. Bow hunting is estimated to cost $31,000 per year per season, and is a 5-year plan, which is clearly an ongoing expense. Bow hunting is safe. She points out that deer don't always die immediately. Fractures deer family, and let's see, bow hunting is effective. As noted above, the efficacy is questioned by the science and data. Deer don't know borders, can come and go from other areas, which the bow hunter himself conceded at the village meeting. Alternative, and then concluding, alternatives exist that must be explored. Deer killing is not deer management, and deer management is not achieved by deer killing. Other options have not been fully considered. To adopt the bow hunting proposal would be reckless and cruel. I implore the board to reject the proposal. We can further explore the problem and solutions, but please tell the IWC that bow hunting is not the answer. Okay, I think that's all the letters. It's public comment in case anybody else wants to talk besides me.
But not about anything on the agenda today, right?
Correct. If you have something on the agenda, save it for when we get to it. It would be better. All right. Consent agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the minutes from the regular meetings on March 18, 2024, and special meeting on March 21, 2024, to approve out-of-town travel for superintendent of water sewer, and to approve the 2023 budget transfers and modifications? Actually, I'm making the motion. Anybody want a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are now going to continue the public hearing to consider a local law amending the village code to limit ARB review of solar panels and developments requiring HOA. You will recall that we removed from this the aspect of it that would have removed ARB review of the rear of the house. So if you're planning on commenting on that, you don't need to do it. So I'm opening up for anybody who wants to make a comment. Please.
Good evening, Paul Fecalora, Irvington Landmark Preservation. So let me just make sure I'm correct on this. The changes are saying anything outside the historic district are now no longer under the valuation of the ARB, is that correct?
No.
No, there were 3 elements of this. One was, and this is outside the historic district, correct me if I get this wrong. One was if it's subject to HOA approval.
Right.
A second was
So,
solar panels, yes, thank you. After reading all those letters, I'm getting a little punchy.
I'm happy to help.
Or actually, why don't you do it? Go ahead, what's the third one?
And the third one was the one about the backs of houses, but after all of the hearings, we removed the backs of houses from the local law, and now it would just be that outside the historical area, there's no ARB approval necessary for solar panels or for non-residential buildings where the HOA applies. I'm sorry, residential buildings.
But those solar panels are still subject to the existing regulations.
Just not the ARB.
Correct, and I know Earl, maybe I'll prevent you from having to get up out of your seat, which you suggested we take a look at the solar regulations to see how they might interact with historic buildings. And if I'm not mistaken, I did do that shortly afterwards, that much I know, but, and I think there is actually a reference in it, not necessarily directly to historic buildings, but to the nature of the buildings itself, if I'm not mistaken. It's not, in other words, it's not done in a vacuum.
All right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's right.
It's your turn anyway, I'm addressing other people in
That's
the
okay,
audience. but-
that's okay. Well, so if it's still under the guidance of the guide laws, then why are we changing to taking it away from the ARB? I
We're
mean,
trying to make it easier for people to have solar panels.
okay.
And again,
So,
remember, these were the ones that came from the ARB to us when 2 years ago, when the board and everyone else started looking at possible ways to streamline the process involving the ARB and the rest of the process, and the ARB sent us a letter and said, here are 3 things you should consider doing.
Right.
That was the 3 things in the legislation. We've now taken out one of them, and those 2 are remaining. And I know that Charlotte Binns has said from her as the The green coordinator, she's in favor of the solar panels, and I think that's a priority of the village, to make sure we get as many solar panels up in the village as we can.
All right, I understand that perspective, but you made a comment the last meeting that one of the biggest issues that you've heard on the street when you're going around Irvington is people complaining about the solar panels. And
Not about the solar panels, about
the ARB.
approval process
Right.
of the planning board and
Right.
the
Right.
ARB, yes.
So,
And then and the building department, the whole
right.
shebang, not any one group, just the
Right,
whole process, right, yeah.
So, I might say, have a different perspective on that and say, well, they're doing a great job because they're following the guidelines. But if you'll allow a little metaphorical perspective on this, if you have an itch in your hand, let's say, there's a couple ways of dealing with it. One way is to cut off your hand, rather drastic approach, but you get rid of the itch. Has other problems, other issues. The other approach would be have a doctor come and look at the itch and make some prescriptions as to how to resolve that. And I think cutting out the obligation of the ARB to look at the roof panels, solar panels, is a rather drastic approach, just like cutting off the hand. And rather than a doctor, you just get an architect. That would be your doctor. Have an architect, or whoever you think is the appropriate person, to review the guidelines, to streamline the process, to get what you would like to accomplish accomplished. So you can get more solar panels up there. But going back to my very first letter, you still need someone to have an aesthetic perspective on this decision-making. So I think that a surgery is not required here. I think a doctor is. And those doctors working with the ARB to solve that is their better solution.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Larry, I don't know if you were looking up what I was referencing. Am I imagining that, or?
No, you're not imagining it, but it's not as cut and dry as what you were suggesting.
Okay,
I
that's it.
can put them on the screen if you want to look at them. up to
That's
you.
not a bad idea.
Just give me a second.
You're gonna have to make it slightly larger.
I know,
I
yeah,
don't know
I'm
about
getting
anybody
there.
else in this room, but,
I'm getting there. Okay.
yeah.
So you were asking about historic
Yeah.
particularly, right? So I didn't see it right away, but maybe I'm missing it.
Well, the word historic, maybe it isn't in there, but there is at least something that considers the nature of the building. Somebody tell us what we're looking at?
Those are the solar energy guidelines.
I can keep going, just let me know.
Yeah, shall be installed in a manner that minimizes visibility from fronting properties in public rights of way. And shall use, to the extent practicable, shall use materials, color, and textures designed to blend with the structure to which it's affixed. Yeah, you scroll up, if that's okay with everybody else.
Oh, what are we doing? Are we just looking through the guidelines
I just wanted to
now?
see-
What the guidelines are?
Yeah,
Keep going, Larry, this is the one.
and then it limits how far up it can, how far off the roof it can be. Go ahead. This is more, yeah.
These are the guidelines we have now?
Yes.
Yeah, they're in the code.
And it's basically what this
We get rid of.
sends us to. It's our default. Well, we won't get rid of it.
But
These
this is
stay
what
in
it
place,
is.
yeah.
Just instead of the ARB applying.
They would just have to follow these rules.
And it's only for outside the historic district, right?
Yes.
Well, these guidelines.
No, I don't mean the
Historic
guidelines,
district,
I
but
mean,
the
what-
ARB.
the ARB
Will
continues,
review it if it's in the historic.
yes. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm with Mitch on this one, and that is, at least I think I am. You'll let me know when I finish describing what I think you're saying. And that is, I want to encourage, to the maximum extent possible, the reliance on solar. It won't matter what historic buildings we have if we can't do something about the environment. And I don't think, even not touching these regulations exactly the way they are, there is an enormous risk to buildings outside of the historic district. These were drafted purposely by the prior board, or probably by you, but with the prior board's input.
Board was really involved.
They were
Oh,
very
all right.
involved, yeah.
Thinking exactly what they wanted, and I tend to agree with it, to enable solar to be promoted in the village. I honestly don't think, given the descriptions in these provisions, that there's an enormous risk here. They have to match the materials. They cannot be more than a certain distance off the roof.
I mean, I'm gonna say something else. Like, I think as a homeowner, I think most people don't want to make your house look terrible, right?
Yeah,
So
well,
I think in the general sense, and having been through that process myself, I still think that like what I would want, like what I'm paying for and want my house to look like, I think that opinion is really important versus people who are not living in my house. So I think we have guidelines. I don't know why on top of guidelines we need more review, and that's certainly not going to encourage solar. So to me, that is the opposite. Where you're basically, we're saying one policy and then we're making it harder for people. So I think it's the opposite. So I think, that's what I sit on it.
I mean, for me, I agree with you, John. I mean, my basic idea is there are two huge issues here for me. The first is we're in a climate crisis, right? And I think that we as a village don't have control over the world. I can't make everybody take action in order to that, but we do have a little bit of a say over what happens in the village, and I would like to do everything within the power of the village to encourage people to have solar panels to lessen the dependence on fossil fuels. The second issue is that we have a problem that's been identified since before I was on the board, that there needs to be a streamlining to the way that people go through the process of getting approvals for things. And there was, like I said, there was a committee that Mark Gillian began. That's how far back it goes. It's like two trustee elections ago, that's what I meant to say, excuse me. Looking into this, went through an entire process, that went out, there was some pushback and everything, so we're gonna form another committee to do that. When Doug McClure spoke at the last meeting, his letter that he sent to us that John referenced, and I referenced the letter when Doug was speaking and I was speaking to Doug, is that he suggested that there needs to be a complete overlook of how this is done to help things be streamlined, while also, obviously, Doug is very in favor of keeping in architectural review board review of things to keep the character of the village and everything. Those two things to me say that there's no reason, and the third thing, of course, is that these suggestions came from the architectural review board. When there was pushback on the backs of houses, I know Larry Lonke felt strongly, I don't want to talk out of school, but he said it here, so I'm not saying anything that wasn't public, that he thought we should pass it as is, that it came from the ARB. Honestly, I tend to agree with him, but the reason why I agreed, no, let's take that out for now, is because there's going to have to be some look at this. We can't dodge this, right? People in the community don't want the same level of burden when they go to do things. They want consistency, they want to know what they're going to face, and they're going to do it in an orderly way, not being bounced around and things like that. So eventually this is going to all be looked at. For now, John, you've described this many times as low-hanging fruit. I think it is low-hanging fruit to say, you know what? We need to have solar panels in as many places as possible and to make it easy as people to do that as possible. We exempted the historic district so that there be no risk to that area that's been designated to keep the historical character. I think the risk of any historical building outside being some way ruined by a solar panel is infinitely less than what could have been done with the back of the building, where someone could have put like an Art Deco back on Odell's Tavern, right? And that's not something that any of us want to see. So I think this is exactly the compromise from all the parts of everywhere is going, is to allow the solar panels, allow the HOA that people don't seem to have a problem with, and then we're going to go forward and we're going to see what we can do with a committee that's being formed right now to see what we can do to make this easier for people in the village to get through the process. That's my view on it, and so I strongly favor passing this along.
Anybody else from the public want to say something?
Rick Rizzullo, Chair of the Architecture Review Board. I guess I'll go over this again because I know the last time I was here, when it came to ARB stuff, I did talk about, there's two separate issues here. One is this committee that we're looking to, fill was already a committee that was formed 2 years ago, and that was designed to look at the whole picture. Okay? It was designed to look at the whole picture and make it easier for the applicant to get, whatever they want through the system or not, whether it was positive. I will say that from certainly the time that those regulations were enacted, there has never been a person who was turned down for solar energy. Never. And I'm not sure if before that there was either. I don't recall in my years of being on the Architecture Review Board. So there's, like I said, there's two issues here. One is, we're looking to at one point it was three things. First of all, the letter that came from the ARB was a suggestion as to things that should be looked at. How they immediately became, put into code, I don't know. But the point is, we're looking to pass this law for two things. There used to be three, but it's two. What happens when that committee gets together and says, well, maybe that really wasn't the right thing to do? How are we going to do it?
Sam, we could.
Same way. We make a change.
I know that's a risk. There's one more thing that and perhaps you were getting to it, and that is, it's taking off of the ARB's plate certain approvals that takes your time. It could process other requested approvals that are not solar, that are not HOA governed. So there's the flip side of it as well.
I don't recall any of my board members complaining about how long the meetings are taking, quite frankly.
It's really the public, right? I think it's the public. That's what we're responding to.
Well, let me ask you a question. I know you have done work in your house, so
Yeah.
you have called the building inspector.
Yeah.
How fast do you think he's going to get there versus the ARB making a decision? Because I know, in my experiences.
Yeah, I will just tell you that from my experience during that process, and I certainly sat in a lot of those meetings, the way that the streamlining of the process, I think, has to happen.
Oh, I agree.
Right? Because for me, the worst of it was, the order, and then at the end, the ARB, and then having to go back to the planning board. Like, so to me, the way we do it now for residents, I understand, having done it myself, that it is not optimal. You may avoid, like, if you may not have the experience I had you're doing maybe a discrete thing, right? If you do something like I did, which is a complete renovation of my whole house, right? So then I had to go through all the boards. So I got to experience that process, right? And so I am sympathetic to people who complain to me, like Mitch, all the time. And I understand it. I can't say to them, I don't know what you're talking about, because I had my own process, right? And I have my own experience with actually even some negative contact with, with some, I won't even say what boards, but whatever. But it was not the smoothest process. So, but okay, fine, I could put up with that, right? My renovation happened. But I do think, to the extent that we can streamline the process, and by the way, for the ARB, I just want to echo what you said, which is to let the ARB do the applications and put your focus on the things that matter the most, right? So my biggest thing is, same thing when we pass the sheds. I know there's so much fear about, like, people are going to do this crazy stuff, and, like, people didn't do crazy stuff with the sheds, right? I don't think that most homeowners, you care more, trust me, I care more about my house than the ARB cares about my house, right? I'm not gonna put some ugly panels. And if someone does that, maybe that is their taste, and maybe the ARB doesn't like it. So then how do you Trump, you know,
Taste doesn't add in, it's
but
what's on that document there that
If it's
matters.
that, so then if it's what's on that document, then to me, then that is something the ARB shouldn't have to worry so much about, right? Because there's some rules, and the homeowner should follow those rules, and that should be okay. And I'm gonna tell you, I'm someone who does not like to legislate or make rules. Let's talk about making rules in my own house for the off examples, right? Like, I think you have to kind of legislate for the general public, and you might have those off situations, but you can't make rules for the people who are not going to follow the rules, because the people who are not going to follow rules are not going to follow the rules anyway. So you can make all the rules you want for those people, but you know, you have to make things that make sense for everybody and gives the ARB time to focus on what they need to focus on. That's what we're trying to do.
I agree, I understand.
I would use a different metric than you use. You said that no one's been not approved. That's not what I'm thinking about. That wasn't even in my head. What I'm trying to do is to remove a step. In other words, let's say
You're not really removing a
I don't
step,
have-
though, are you?
We are though. I mean, you don't have to go in front of the ARB if you want to put in panels, which can be kind of overwhelming to somebody. I mean, I live in a co-op. I don't have a house, but if I did, I wouldn't want to feel like, I'd want to have as few hurdles as possible to me putting those solar panels on my roof. And to say that you have to go in front of the ARB is a hurdle. And even if you're always going to get
You still gotta go to the
get
building
approved-
department, though. It's still another step.
But the building part would have been involved anyway, though, because there are permits involved and everything. It's not like an extra
Well,
process.
who knows what's gonna happen when we, conjoin the two.
Well, when we can join the whole thing, we'll have a whole new system, and hopefully will be a great system. But in the meantime, that's why my metric is different than yours. It's not about approvals and not approvals. It's about I'm imagining that I'm living in a house, and I'm like, I want, like when I needed a new car in last April, I bought a hybrid, right? Like, and I wanted to get an electric, but some of the hurdles were too high to overcome, right? Well, when people go to want to do that in their house, if I'm picturing myself now being in a house with that decision, I want to remove as many hurdles as possible so that people can put solar panels up. And I see this as removing one hurdle, because there's time and expense that goes into going in front of the ARB, right? And it's like this: if you say to someone, "Oh, you can put panels up, but you have to get approved by the ARB," there's going to be a percentage of people that go, "Ugh, never mind, it's not worth it."
That's the first I'm hearing something like that.
I hear it all the time from people who are completely overwhelmed by the
I'm
system.
overwhelmed that we're such big,
Not you.
big bad.
No, Rick.
Not you, just the process.
No, the ARB. I am the ARB at this
No, not
point.
the ARB, not the ARB. The entire approval process in the village, the planning board, the ARB, the building department, everything you have to go through if you want to do anything to your home. And I'm telling you that when I got elected, I honestly thought people were going to start coming to me with every problem in the village. Like, "Oh, you're on the board now? I want to tell you about this." No one has ever come to me with anything except this entire real estate approval process. It is literally the only thing, and I hear it again and again and again. And that's why I feel from the very beginning, when I came onto the board already, there was already a movement to try and get low-hanging fruit. It's funny you use that term because that was Brian's term, and that's where the shed thing came from right after I came on the board. That predates me. The board has been looking for ways to make it easier for homeowners because that is the complaint that we get again and again and again. And everyone of my friends who's gone through this, they all call me, "Is there anything you can do about this?" People don't know about village government. I had someone text me and say, "Are you on the architectural review board? I need to." I'm like, "I'm not on the architectural review board. That's a separate body." And and so it's like that there is something that needs to be addressed. And I'm sorry, it's not you. It's not the architectural review board. It's the process, right? So what we're talking about here is when you said no one's been rejected, that's not my metric. That's not how I'm measuring this. I'm measuring it by how many hurdles.
The other issue is outside the historic district. I can point to two houses, one up in above the high school and one off Sunnyside, where the applicant came to us with a mishmash of locations on their roof where these panels were going, and instead of accepting it for what it was, which is what's going to happen now, is we said, look, the rules say you have to at least try to put them, in some organized fashion on the roof. The person, didn't, even though the back of the house was southerly, had a southerly exposure, and the north, they still wanted them on the north of the house. And the point was, another rule there was you should try to make them, to put them on a location that's not on a main thoroughfare facing in front of the house. It was still approved. So I just don't,
But they had to go in front of the board, do you understand? We have different metrics, I mean, it's
You
just,
obviously have not dealt with the building department.
what they're gonna be dealing, but you have to deal with the building department anyway, so I'm saying, I have dealt with the building department when I redid my kitchen
After
on
the
my
fact.
apartment. What?
After the fact.
What do you mean?
After you get your ARB approval, you still have to, get the permit from the building department, so
Right. So there were 2 hurdles, now there's 1 hurdle, that's what I'm saying.
it's still two separate hurdles. He has to approve it, formally approve it.
Right.
That's,
He would have had to approve it anyway.
no, that would be our job.
No, but he still has to, you still have to.
No,
get
he
the
has
building
to
department.
supply the building permit,
Right, that's what I'm saying.
but that's after the job is done.
Can I say something a little bit different? I think I hear you, Rick, but I think this is, to me, it's almost like the sheds. Like, there's this fear that we're gonna have again, I think maybe we feel I'd be fine with solar panels. I would love to put solar panels in my house. I can't, too many trees. But the thing is, I do think that I hear you, but I guess what we're saying is that we want people to put solar panels, and we want to trust that people are going to care about their house and care what it looks like and do as good of a job as they can do.
You wouldn't
And
have to
we
trust them if you had the ARB.
I mean, I know, but you have to.
I mean, we still have it's the same rules, the rules
Yeah.
aren't changing, right?
Yeah, the
So-
rules are not changing, so yeah.
We listened to you. We didn't ignore what you guys said. We took out one of the 3 provisions. It's not like we're not listening, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just think ultimately, though, there are certain priorities, and to me, like, when it was back of the house and everything, it's like, well, the historical thing is far more important in that regard because that we make sure we take care of those buildings. But when it comes to the solar, it just swings for me because I just think that's so much more important. Like if there's a solar array on top of a house built in the 1800s, it's people aren't going to say, oh look, it's an ugly house. They're going to say, look at that beautiful 19th century house. Oh, it has solar panels on it. I mean, it's not the same as if someone built an Art Deco, back to the Odell Tavern. But to me, they're not comparable.
Well, I just want to go on record saying that the 2 things that you want to pass, the ARB is against.
Wait, the HOA thing also you oppose?
No, that was already.
Those are the 2 things, the HOA and the solar
But
panels.
what's left is HOA and solar panels. You're not objecting to HOA, you're objecting to
No.
the rear of the house and solar?
No, just the HOA is, I thought was already a done deal.
No, that's in the same.
That's also in the
That's-
law.
That-
We get it. So what's left now, you're objecting to the solar part?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Earl Ferguson. I know, John, you tried to save me from having to do this.
That's all right. You're entitled.
I would like to thank the board for considering putting together a task force of professionals and people homeowners as well, or anybody who's had the experience with the overall process of getting a permit in the village. No one will object to that being improved, I guarantee you that. I did want to follow up on the solar panels with regard to historic buildings. Historic preservation, the word preservation is a very important part of a definition of what is an historic building, especially those that have been reviewed by the State Historic Preservation Office, buildings that may be listed as eligible for nomination, either on the state or national level. The Park Service, the Federal National Park Service, has put out a set of guidelines and standards for solar panels as they may or not impact historic buildings. And I don't think that while our current standards are very good, I would suggest that maybe we consider making them a little bit more robust where it comes to historic buildings, particularly those that may have already been recognized either locally or on the state and national level in some way. I'm not suggesting that you would have to redo the entire standards that you've already put out, but maybe tweak them a little bit so that if there's not a design review board looking at these applications, maybe a building inspector, whether it's our current building inspector, a future building inspector, if they are the ones who are left to make these decisions, they would at least have those guidelines to follow. Thank you.
Anybody else? And I know I've skimmed through the Park Service regs on this, but I think calling a conversation perhaps with you, that, or it might have even been with you, there's a real level of complexity in those that make it almost impossible. That doesn't mean there aren't concepts within them to be ported over, but that make it really difficult for an average homeowner to comply with them. Am I
Yeah, no,
characterizing
that was,
correctly?
That came from Ed.
that was from Ed, yeah, and
Oh.
he said, I think he called it onerous, actually, but
Okay,
whatever.
got it. So, I don't mind, I'm not inclined to change where I think the board is going with this at the moment, but I don't have an objection to taking a look at what we have in our solar regs, just to see if there isn't some tweak that indicates to the, and I don't mean to make light of it by calling it a tweak, I mean a modification that points out to the building inspector that when he's looking at it, he can take into consideration that it is, and again, we're back to where I was before, which is how you define what an historic home is. But let's just say the overall characteristics of a home, including its historic provenance, something that's a little.
Well, you can make it, I think the concern are the already designated historic buildings that happen not to be in the historic district. So you could limit it like that to whatever buildings are designated.
All right. So
I don't think you need to look at this until you look at the rest of the streamlining process, because you have a whole group of people who want to get rid of the guidelines that you have because it doesn't meet the solar, the
Yes.
streamlined solar permitting.
Doesn't Charlotte have some kind of like,
Yeah, that was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can't look at it
All right.
at just the one issue,
So
in my opinion.
when are we? Am I correct? It's this coming work session we were going to have a start discussing the streamlining, or am I
Yes,
imagining?
well, I penciled it in, I mean.
Good, all
I
right.
haven't finalized
There you
it
go.
yet.
So, as part of that discussion, I'll remind you, or collectively, we can just, when we're going through exactly what the streamlining committee's gonna do, we can consider that as part of the process. So, okay.
That means that's just one small piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely. There are,
Yeah.
and I am not predetermining where this committee takes the process. What we're looking for is something that just makes it easier to navigate the approval process.
can I say something about that?
Of course.
Because Rick, when you said something about we're talking about the architectural review board, I think you misunderstand, and I think I can say something in a way that'll explain it better. When somebody goes to the planning board and gets approval, and then they go to the architectural review board and it gets bounced back, the architectural review board has done nothing wrong. Do you understand that? I'm not saying the ARB has done anything wrong. What I'm saying is that is a system that isn't working because the people are getting their input at the wrong times. So if we can have a system by which that doesn't happen anymore, that's better. It's nothing, you have done, the ARB has done nothing wrong in that scenario. It's the system that's done something wrong.
And frankly, I don't know how you're gonna circumvent that, to be honest with you. When you push comes to shove and you start doing all these, changes, I don't know how that's gonna be able
Well,
to change.
I think in that process that we were talking about, what we were trying to do is move, right? Was
Yeah,
move
the ARB
when the
before
ARB
the-
input comes
Right,
in.
and that's what we'll get input and try and figure out. But the underlying point I was making was that, like, I don't want you to feel in any way, shape, or form like the ARB is being attacked. It's not like that.
I don't feel that way.
Okay, because
I don't-
what you
I don't
said
feel that
before about it, I misunderstood what you said, and I apologize.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, it's just, it's the process. It's the pieces. None of the pieces do anything wrong. It's how the pieces are coming together.
I get it.
That isn't
And the
working.
order of the pieces,
Yeah.
right? That was
Well,
one
And
of the
look,
things, yeah.
that's
that
something
was
we've
one
been
of the
talking
things.
about since 10/11,
Yeah.
2010.
Right.
So
How
let's
did
do
that-
something about it.
So that's what.
Look, if there's something there that's viable, I'll be the first one to sign up for it.
Okay.
I do have one other question, though.
Yeah.
In the change, section 3, paragraph 12, we're taking out notifying people who live around the house that's getting the solar energy. Is there a reason for that?
Because the reason was so they can come to the ARB meeting and complain, right?
Right.
So if there's no ARB meeting, then
There's no point.
what are they're telling them, and then they do what?
Well, if you were the neighbor of a house that's getting solar panels, there is a point.
No, because you can't do anything about it. So like if there's something on my house that I'm painting my house, you can't, and that's not something that requires review. What are you gonna do as a neighbor? I'm gonna give you notice like that I'm painting my house?
It's called respect.
Well, I don't think we should
I
legislate
mean,
that. I think
yeah,
people should just tell their
right,
neighbors
people,
that.
yeah.
You're assuming it's gonna happen that way.
Or you're assuming it's not. You're assuming it's not.
Because I've been around a while.
But listen, when I did my I think people, you can't legislate people being, okay, I'm not gonna even use the word I was gonna say.
Well, you
So
said
that's-
respect, and I'm like, people who are respectful act with respect, and people who are not respectful aren't gonna be respectful, even if there's a law that makes them. Do you know what I mean? I understand your point, I do, yeah.
Actually, I can interject on that. Not about people, but about solar panels. So,
First, you gotta give us a name.
John Price, longtime Irvington resident. But I do think that there is cases where solar panels at the wrong angle can provide a glare that is not intended, it's not malicious, it just happens. And maybe it should be also included into the building or even the ARB, or however you want to do it, to make sure that if you're on the roof and you do something like this, your neighbor may be getting blasted into their kitchen windows.
That's in the guidelines.
It is in the
Yeah, I think the
guidelines.
guidelines.
Okay, good.
Limits the angle at
That's,
which you
I was,
can- yeah.
I was just trying to explain that because I have had several people have that issue and say, I didn't know who to talk to about it. Like, and now I have these solar panels are up on my neighbor's roof and they're, I can see them at night. But, okay, as long as it's in there.
If this, assuming the change goes forward, that's the building inspector that.
Right, and people have
Exactly.
complained about that also, like that they can't, that the way our code is set up, the panels that do go up on the roof are not maximally effective because the regulations are so strict trying to avoid that it goes over to the other side. I don't know about that firsthand, I've just had people complain that to me, I don't know if that's true or not.
Most of the panels today are anti-glare rated.
Oh, really? Okay, there you go. Thank you.
Technology,
Yeah.
look,
Yeah.
technology resolving our issues.
But the important point here is what you're concerned about is already in the guidelines for the solar, because we've heard feedback on that from other people.
Okay.
And thank
Anybody
you for
else?
that information, that's good to know.
Okay, any further comments on that side? No, then I'm gonna make the motion. Whereas, the motion is whereas adoption of said local laws.
Close the public hearing first.
Oh,
Sorry.
I'm gonna close the public hearing. Is that a motion or just?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, now I'm gonna make a motion to adopt this resolution. Whereas adoption of said local laws is an unlisted action under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, SECRA, and whereas the Board of Trustees has reviewed the environmental assessment form related to said local law and has determined that such adoption will have no negative environmental impacts. Now therefore be it resolved that a negative declaration under SECRA be issued, and further resolved to adopt a local law amending the village code to limit ARB review of solar panels and development requiring HOA approval. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
You'll get John's signature.
Yes. I just made a note.
You know, so I'm reminded that good compromise means nobody walks away completely happy. So I think we might have accomplished that today.
Okay. Public hearing on the operating budget.
Do you want me to give an overview
Sure.
first? Okay.
Yeah.
So, our tentative budget for 24-25 reflects a tax rate increase of 7.7607 per thousand of assessed valuation. But this is a decrease of 0.0824 per thousand, which is down 1.05% from last year. However, this will not necessarily result in lower taxes. Assessed valuations have increased approximately 5.43%, and only 1.87% of this is made up of new construction. So for an average property owner with an assessed value of 1.3 million, village taxes would decrease by approximately $107. However, if the same property's assessment increased by 3.56%, village taxes would increase by approximately $253. So our tax levy increase is a total of $692,674, or 4.32%. It is tax cap compliant. The Office of the State Controller calculated inflation for our budgetary period to be 4.37%. However, the tax levy cap growth factor remains capped at 2%, which causes issues since a lot of the increases are higher than 2%. Total expenses increase by approximately $1.55 million. Salaries make up 34% of the budget. It includes the CSEA contract increase of 3.5%, which is effective June 1st, 2024. Non-union increases are included in contingency. The IPD contract calls for the negotiation of base wages for the 24-25 and 25-26 fiscal years. So estimates subject to future collective bargaining are also on the police salary line. There's a $94,000 increase in personnel services, which is for step increases and the full year impact of the additional officer that was added last year in response to increased demands in the detective division. Operational efficiencies were identified, resulting in DPW seasonal part-time personnel savings in the amount of $54,000 and Parks part-time labor savings in the amount of $6,100. There's also salary savings of $11,768 in the Recreation Department due to planned staffing changes. One of the biggest increase is retirement, which is an increase of $333,825, which is a result of pension rates as established by the State Controller's Office based on the performance of the state's pension fund, which is highly correlated to equity and debt market performance. There's an increase of $300 to $55 over the past 3 years. Health insurance plans have increased on average 10.4% for individual plans and on average 11.2% for family plans. So the tentative budget provides for an 11% increase to hit in January of '25. So this, in addition to several policies due to retirements and new enrollments, is what causes that increase. There's an increase in debt of $134,480, and the increase is primarily due to the additional borrowings of $2.15 million that were approved as part of the 23-24 capital budget to fund various projects throughout the village. There's also a general liability insurance increase of $35,300, and in this year's budget, $120,000 in assistance for IVAC was added. To offset the expense increases, we also have increases in revenues of $798,000. This includes $522,000 in interest and earnings revenue increases, sales tax revenue increases of $75,000, building permit revenues of $70,000, utilities tax of $30,000, cell tower rental revenue of $22,400, and the newly added EV charging revenue line of $25,000. In this year's budget, we're utilizing $288,000 of surplus. As of last fiscal year end, the village had an unassigned fund balance of $7,028,528, which is 31.6% of our annual budget. Water rates in the tentative budget have an increase of 8%, and sewer rates have an increase of 26% to keep pace with the rising cost of water purchased through New York City, debt service, and personnel-related costs.
Okay, so,
I think we need to open the public hearing.
Yeah, technically.
Okay. Motion to open the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
I had made a suggestion which was widely banned, meaning every board.
public.
Yeah, no, it wasn't the public,
it's
it was
you.
everyone else on the board.
I am here to talk about it.
No, you're definitely gonna get, let me just say one thing, and then it's all yours, since I don't see anybody else here clamoring to talk.
There might be someone online.
Oh, that's fair. I had suggested asking the departments to cut 0.5% and putting it in contingency, but I am persuaded that, given the health of our fund balance, that is not necessary. And we would just ask them to be prudent in terms of what they spend. And I know they don't, our fund balance wouldn't be growing if they were spending more than than what they have budgeted in the past. So I relent on that particular point. Having said that, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for all you're doing. This is why coffee is coffee, right? But anyway, and questions, and Madam Treasurer, I did read your letter, and it was very nicely done, and thank you for the hard work. I think some of the questions that I've been asked from the taxpayers for Irvington Future to explain is the operating budget and the capital budget. You know, how are they intertwined, and how do they go hand in hand? So it's not, I'm not here for on line 27 and section 3 and personnel costs versus labor, and I know you spoke to Melinda about it a little bit, but generally the understanding of the process where, you know, is a capital budget, Mr. Mayor, you referenced, you know, an F-150 Lightning, and we took $25,000 out of it to pay from a previous capital budget of the past.
No, yeah, sorry, let me just, we have a rule that actually got instituted when I was last mayor 10, 12 years ago, that anytime we spend over $25,000 on anything, we must announce it, because there was.
No, it wasn't about the amount. It was like just the capital budget of the past, like
No, but
that.
that wasn't a cap, oh, actually, I forgive you,
So,
you're absolutely right.
I
It's not a
think
capital budget.
I know what you're asking.
Yeah, sorry.
So we do the operating budget
Yeah.
now, and then I actually sent out budget request forms to the departments today. So the capital budget is subsequent to the operating budget. So the
Right.
debt service numbers in this budget reflect everything up through the 23-24 approved capital budget.
And I would assume there's going to be a approved capital budget for 2024, 25, probably in the summer of 24.
Correct.
I'm guessing. And then just so the capital budget is like the inception of translating into the operating budget, which is balanced and audited, right? Which is just basically whether or not you spent the money, or is whether or not it became an expense or came into the operating budget, right? So it's a graduated process from the capital budget, and this is more of a question.
No, I know. I don't think so.
Coming
I
from
think
the
what he
capital
wants you to
budget into the
explain,
operating
what's
budget.
the difference between the operating budget and the capital budget? That's the question.
Oh, so the capital budget, I mean, most of the time it spans over 1 year, so it could be bigger projects. Some capital projects are funded by a transfer in from the fund balance of the
But a
general
capital
fund, or-
budget is not like rule or law or anything. It's the best intentions of a budget going forward.
Because it may be, not law, but a capital asset is what is the subject of the capital budget, which means it's got to have at least a 1-year life, and most of these have some of them are as many as 20 years, and that is what determines the length of the bond that you take out. Sometimes,
that was my next one.
Sometimes we will take
And whether you put it in one
assets.
budget or not. Right?
Sometimes we will take assets that are capital assets because we can afford to do it and pay them off as an operating purchase. Why?
Right.
Because in this environment with 5% interest, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Save yourself the interest.
Right, so as I understand it, that was going to be one of my next questions, Mr. Mayor, is the capital budget in a lot of ways is funded by debt for large purposes, broadly speaking, of
Yeah.
course. And then the operating budget is funded by revenue, as, you know, you pay your, out of your salary, your daily expenses. You want to buy a house, you go to the bank, you take out a loan.
Right, that's exactly the analogy. The home, you know, you buy
Mm-hmm.
food or gasoline or electric,
Sure.
That's your operating budget. If you've got a mortgage, that's your capital
Or a new
budget.
car.
Or a new car, yeah, if you financed it.
And so like something that if we look going forward in 25, 26, like a DPW dump truck, that's almost like a wish list or something that we think the village thinks it may need down the road, but it's not a guarantee it's going to happen. But you're trying to plan for it in the best of circumstances, right?
It's a little, I think when we get to the capital budget, there will be some things that will say, we'd love to have this, but it's too expensive, or what,
Right,
however we.
find another solution on an operating
And then
line
here,
basis.
stuff gets booted.
Yeah,
stuff
or
gets
maybe we
moved.
don't, right, or we don't do it, we push it off.
Right. And then with the debt and the debt servicing, so I know the 7 million of debt and the servicing, and then how is the decision made versus reserves and surpluses? Like whether we really want to carry the debt? I mean, I hope it's probably at low historic interest rates, we'll never pay it back. But versus, are we going to use some of the reserves to pay down our debt? Is there?
So you budget in the operating budget for the interest to be paid, yes? And any
Yes.
current principal, meaning within the next year?
Yes, so the operating budget includes the payments, principal and interest payments on the bands, and then the debt service fund pays the serial bonds.
So, in case this isn't second nature to you, and it barely is to me, the ban is the short-term borrowing, when you first
Right.
decide, I'm gonna, if you know this, I'll.
No, I know it.
Okay,
I know it.
fine, okay.
I was gonna say, it sounds like he knows. it.
Yeah, no, I know it.
But the open question, I think, is at the time you decide to do a project, how do you determine how to fund that? Do you fund it with debt, or do you fund it with existing surplus funds?
Exactly.
That's a decision that they make at the time of the capital budget when they
Yeah.
adopt it. So we go through a process, publicly, obviously, we go through a process where we look at each project and we decide which ones have merit, which ones don't, which ones need to get done, which ones can be put off. And then at the same time, we look at how could they be best funded?
Yeah.
If there's typically smaller projects, pieces of equipment, a police car, smaller
Right.
things might be fundable using surplus funds on a one-time only basis. Larger projects, $1 million culverts and, other large pieces of equipment or buildings or anything like that is typically going to be funded by debt.
And then is it,
But there's no rule.
the capital budgets seem to me to be, in print, they look a little more solid than they are in reality, I would assume. And like some of these projects come in at 500,000 and balloon to 1 million, and they become a bigger problem, and then other things have to get cut back. So it's a fluid process is what I think I'm understanding.
Yes.
And,
Especially as you get further out in years. I mean, we try, as you know, capital budget is 10-plus years that we're trying to look out in the future.
Right.
So, as you get further out, those projects become essentially
But
placeholders.
I think, and if I'm wrong about this, someone stop me, but there are different types of things in the capital budget, right? So there are things like, it would be really great if we had X, whatever that is, right? And that could be the kind of thing where it's like a one-time thing, and we'll put that back a year. But then there are things that are planned in the capital budget that are, for example, like those police trucks or whatever, or the fire trucks, or the DPW trucks and stuff. They're not gonna last forever. They have to be replaced on a certain schedule. So rather than having to buy 12 at once or whatever, they're kind of scheduled out over time. So like, we'll need a new one in 2028, we'll need a new one in 2032, like that. So those, I think, would be a little bit more solid, because like, if they don't have a truck, they can't pick up our garbage. Do you know what I mean?
right, no, I'd read it.
We're not robotic about it either. When
Sure.
the year arrives and we look at a vehicle that's functioning perfectly.
Of course.
We're not going to replace
Right.
it.
And I would think the most difficult things are the culverts and the parks and the other repairs that are not a tangible asset that you can just say it's going to cost 300 grand, right? You don't know what that is going to take. And that was part of my question about like,
Well, we use an engineering firm to give us the best estimate possible on a lot of these large projects. And to Larry's, actually everybody, Larry and our building department and others, to their credit, we're out there trying to get grants for a lot of these, because you use
Right.
culvert as an example. You might take the opportunity to do a particular culvert if you just got $1 million grant and you knew the project was gonna cost 2, you just got 50% discount, so you wanna move. That could
Understood.
also be a factor.
Yeah, no, I agree with that and understand it. I was just trying to understand the fluidity of the funds and what's going to be a short-term borrowing, long-term borrowing, reserves versus surpluses. And also, what is the revenue stream of the village? Is it constant, or is it bulk payments that come in at certain times of the year to make, and then it's smoothed out on like your kind of spending? Does the village collect tax revenue at certain times, get in a surplus, and then fund different things or fund
I don't know
debt repayment?
About you, but I pay my tax bills
Yeah.
in two particular months.
I
So
know,
I gotta
well.
figure there's lump sums coming in here, significant lump sums in particular, so, you know, shortly after that.
June
Yeah.
and December.
Yeah.
tax
Right,
collection
right.
months, yeah.
And then whatever other revenue which comes in, like building department and all of that, which
Yeah,
is
that
not.
fluctuates.
But they also have high times and low times, right? The bill, because remember, Ed told us at the budget meeting that you can't look at it and extrapolate out if it's 9 months and it's 12 months, because a lot of the stuff has already been spent if you have a big development or whatever. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, one other thing to consider that you didn't exactly ask, but it may be behind some of your questions. We have a sizable fund balance. And you're kind of on both sides of the issue, because I think you're on the facilities planning committee.
Yes.
Or will be. Knowing that there will be some large projects coming, this is personal preference, it doesn't mean that it carries the day. I'm not that eager to quickly spend that money and not, you know, sort of keep taxes at sort of a level. You could reduce taxes if you started taking money out of that.
Of
On
course.
the other hand, when you came to having to borrow for a brand-new building or a remodeled building, people, we saw how people reacted to the proposal across the street. Maybe different issues involved there, but we're trying to keep the fund balance at a healthy level in anticipation of a larger project. If it turns out we're not going to do it, then we may have a different
There's
attitude.
also the issue of the bond rating. So long before I was on the board, the bond rating was lower, and since, starting before I got here, I'm not taking credit. So it was well before I got here, it's been going higher and higher because the fund balance has been healthier and everything. The other thing is that Larry and Katie are a little too good at their job, because every single year they're very small c conservative with their estimates, and every year we try to cut some fund balance by paying for stuff, and then every year it's more than it was the year before. It's like the water coming in, no matter the sorcerer's apprentice, right? So so that's the other reason why it hasn't, I think, gone down, is because if you pay. And the last thing is apparently, and maybe Larry, you can speak to this more, but like during COVID, one of the reasons why we were able to kind of ride through it again before my time was because we had a healthy fund balance, and we were able to kind of survive that in a way that other places had a real problem.
Right, no, I certainly, and I think every resident wants fiscal responsibility and management, and part of that is having a fund balance to ride things out, and responsible debt borrowing, and knowing, you know, what we're doing, and strategic planning. But sometimes, you know, reading some of this stuff, no offense, it can get a little dry, and then when you're looking back and you're like, well, are we really that certain that we're going to, you know, need this in the future? But also, like, understanding it's, you know, particularly in your roles, it's easy for people to criticize, hey, we have a fund balance, why don't we pay down? It's a longer term problem, but it helps when there's other people explaining the mechanism.
Happy to have you do it. If it's you.
We give you the Pied Piper.
Yeah. Oh, master of the obvious here. But that was really like part of understanding this entire, like, and into the capital budgets, and looking at the capital budgets. I imagine that comes up organically from the departments and department heads and everything else, and what is going to be needed. And so, and I would think that there was, you know, probably more conversations in certain areas would be needed. I know that's what we're trying to do in other areas. But I do salute you for a great job on that letter and on the budget. I did look through it, and I would look forward to sending some questions to you outside of this meeting in the future, if that's okay.
Yeah, can I?
Great.
I mean, I think what could be encouraged is I think it could be encouraged for people to pay attention, because I think we go through this process of meeting with like the departments, and honestly, for me, it would be nice to have some public input. You know.
Right.
When they're
So
here.
what? And while we're going through the process, because I think.
And even emails are fine.
Yeah, exactly. Emails, like
Yeah.
Zoom. I don't think people have to physically be here, but
Right.
I'll just give an example. Like I pay attention to the school budget now, like, and I'm listening to those meetings. In fact, I fell asleep on one of them. Like I literally like face planted. I didn't realize it, but because I care about the school budget and I want to know where the money is being spent. I think that is welcomed and people should have comments, but sometimes people will say to me like, oh, we don't need X or Y, but that's true in any budget, right? Like people have different, so it would be great if everyone came and was like, we hate X idea, then we'd be like, well, everyone hates that idea, right? But,
I
you
think
know,
we're only, to start,
Yeah,
because
no,
of
I-
background, I think you skipped the part.
Yeah.
So all the departments come in public meetings,
Right.
beginning in February,
Mm-hmm.
1 or 2 a week, obviously, they all come in the same, we'd be here till 4
Sure.
in the morning, right? And then like, so like, you know, the theater will come in and say, here's our budget, and the library will come in and say, here's our budget, and the DPW will come in and say, here's our budget. And in that presentation, they'll say things like, the police, you know, came in and they said, we want this added if we can get this, we want this added if we can get this. And I think that's a great time for people to say, I think the police department should have that, or I don't think the police department needs that, you know what I mean? It can be throughout the process, it doesn't have to be when we get to this final, because we have no input from the public when
Right.
we're trying to decide on these requests.
And I agree that, you know, when it's already baked and people have a knee-jerk reaction, that's not accretive either. So I agree with you totally. I think that the more information that we can provide, you know, the better off it would be. And in looking, and with the whole idea of being, we love it here, it's great, it's costly. You know, the taxes are something that you can't explain to a lot of people from other parts of the country, right? And I think for that, the knee-jerk reaction is like, oh, the schools, they have a teacher superintendent day, they shouldn't have that. Well, they should, if they need it. But it's through education, I think, and also that education will be the bounce back of, hey, maybe there is something that people feel strongly about that isn't needed. If you think you're serving the residents with something that they don't really want, then that's something that maybe we could,
So, right, so I think that's where you need input, right? I think that's where you have to have like input, which I think a lot of times, you know, people don't really spend the time to kind of understand all these other pieces, which I get it, it's, you know, it's a lot of work, but, you know, I think it's hard to look at one little piece, right? And say, I just don't like that, you know, because you could do that in any budget, right?
Right.
There are pieces of this budget that I could myself say, I really don't think, but that's not really how you do a budget, right? We have a whole team of people that like, you know, if we really want to look at things, and we've talked about this on this board, right? This is one of the things you said, cut 0.5%. I said, okay, let's look at really the things that and this is a conversation with residents, like, you know, if we want lower taxes, what are we willing to give up, right? Because the truth is, there's salaries, there's insurance, there are all these fixed costs that are just fixed costs, and they go up every year, and we have to live with that. So the point is, if we really want to lower taxes, then let's talk about what else are we willing to give up, or what are we willing to do differently? That's a
Right.
conversation.
no, and agreed, and I think the start of it is to read your well-published work and to go through it and look at that and to be educated about it, and that's one of the reasons why I came, because the confusion about the capital budget versus the operating budget, you know, is certainly out there in conversations, because people misunderstand that, you know, not everything drops to the operating budget. You know, it has to have foresight and come through and get baked. And if you want to have an input, you have to do it at the point where it's going to be first discussed, right?
Right. And we will have hearings on the capital budget, I assume.
Well, yeah, they're technically not public hearings, I mean, you can handle it any way you
Yeah,
want.
but people
they're
can
still a
listen
public
in
meeting.
and say, don't do that, and whatever.
Right.
Do that.
Or write a letter,
Yeah.
letter. I mean, letters are just as effective, right?
And we
Right.
also ask questions. I mean, like, I see things in the capital budget, I'm like, why are we doing this? You know what I mean? It's, because they're big numbers, they're big scary numbers. When you look at a budget from a department, say, right? And then you look at some of these capital expenditures that are more than some of the department's budgets are for the year.
Right.
It gets your attention, you know what I mean? Because the game we play, it's not a game, but what we're trying to do is, we have everything going up higher than the cap, right? So the only way that makes that work is, you know, you have to decide where you're gonna cut and things like that. But as Larry Lonke made the point, it's the second time I'm quoting him today, he's not here, is that, you know, that last $100,000 or that last $200,000, you know, we can't control like the benefit payments and the retirement payments and the union contracts and the insurance, which has killed us this year. It's killing everybody. All of those things we can't control. So when you talk about that last 100,000, 200,000, you're talking about rec department programs, you're talking about library programs, you're talking about things that are the most forward-facing things in the village, right?
Right.
And that's why, that's why I think we all piled on John's request, is that, we had, and there were some specific things, the building department went way over, in a good way, with their revenue budget. We know that they far exceeded what was budgeted for them this year. So I thought giving some of that back to the taxpayers in a way of not, making those cuts was a good way to do it. We also have something we didn't discuss that I thought it was, if the money going to IVAC is not a forever expense, it's a bridge. That's another thing it's defensible to use fund balance for, because it's not a recurring, at least not on the long term, recurring thing. So that would be another defensible thing to use fund balance. Because if you use fund balance for something, the next year, if it's a recurring expense, then you have to use fund balance again and again and again.
Or make drastic cuts elsewhere if you're trying to make up for it.
Right. So if you use fund balance, it should be on things that are one-offs.
And I think everybody should respect that you are doing your jobs and you guys are looking at this. Residents' concerns are one-off at once in a while. Hey, why is that social studies teacher getting paid? They can't teach. But, there is, the machine should not grow so big that you can't question big, parts of it too. The police are 25% of our operating budget, right? It's a big number.
It's been said in other ways, but personnel and related costs are going to keep expanding. It's almost unavoidable unless our revenue sources grow faster, which is pretty, it's an iffy proposition. And I think that's part of why the tax cap was instituted, at least I believe this, is villages, they didn't want so many levels of government.
Right.
From the top down, and villages are going to keep getting squeezed.
And to your point with the police, that's why we didn't approve an expansion of a position, because when you do that, it's not just one.
Of course.
It's
And it's not a one-time expense,
exactly.
actually.
And it's
Pension, the
not-
healthcare, everything.
Exactly. So if anything, we
and-
need to limit, I think I'm just speaking for myself here, not the rest of the board, but that's something any new position being created in the village needs to be scrutinized to death, because I think that's the thing that really is the risk going forward. It's not a rec program that costs $20,000 to put,
Great.
right?
No, I agree wholeheartedly, and I think that's what people have faith that you guys are doing, and I believe you are doing it, having read your novel. But I think that it's an ongoing process. It's every day. It's like balancing your home, checkbook, and that getting this information out will be something that I'm going to try to do in cooperation with you, Mr. Mayor, in a way that we can stop the easy questions and start talking about issues or problems. But thank you for your time.
Appreciate your time. So, Larry, what are my options here? Do our options, we can continue this for another meeting, or
You have any of those options. You can
close?
You could close the hearing now, vote on it. You can keep the hearing open.
I'm inclined to keep it
Oh,
open.
keep it open,
Okay.
sure, yeah.
Okay. Finally, people agree with me.
Yes.
We often agree with you,
Oh,
John.
so that's what I meant. So I need a motion? Don't?
No.
All right, hearing stays open, fine. So you can invite your friends back next time.
Yes.
if you'd like.
Or just a comment, also what people can do is they can watch, the thing about the meetings being taped, they can go back and watch some of the capital budget, you know what I mean, just to get themselves familiar with what that is.
More than informative.
And
And there are historical capital budgets that you
Absolutely.
can look up,
Yeah.
not to mention the fact that you can double the speed. of the- I watched a lot of meetings, and it saves you a little bit of time. You can still understand it.
And to your point, you can also see that there are things that those capital budgets that projected that never end up happening.
Right.
Because there was no, we're not doing that, or we're pushing that back.
Okay. Support of Packaging Reduction Act and Returnable Container Act. So I'm going to offer a motion. I think you folks are off of me.
Yeah.
This one, okay.
Yeah.
Whereas packaging makes up approximately 40% of the waste in New York State, and whereas managing packaging waste costs New York taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars annually, and whereas some packaging is not recyclable and reusable and refillable packaging systems are not readily available, and whereas plastic causes serious pollution, including litter and use of toxic chemicals, and whereas companies that produce packaging should help bear the costs of packaging waste, not just taxpayers, And whereas enacting the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act is drafted in the New York State Assembly A.5322-B and the New York State Senate S.4246-B would reduce waste, increase recycling rates, create jobs, reduce toxicity in products, provide millions of dollars in savings for local governments and taxpayers, and lower greenhouse gas emissions. And whereas the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act should work in tandem with and supplement New York State's Returnable Container Act, and whereas New York's Returnable Container Act should be modernized to reflect an expanding market of beverages, and be it resolved that the Village of Irvington urges the New York State Legislature to pass and Governor Kathy Hochul to sign into law the Strong and Effective Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act, A5322-B/S4246-B, and an expanded and modernized Returnable Container Act, A.6353/S.237-B, and further resolve, the Village of Irvington shall forward copies of this resolution to Governor Kathy Hochul, the New York State Assembly Majority Leader Andrea Stewart Cousins, Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie, Assembly Member Mary Jane Shimsky, and all others deemed necessary and proper. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I wonder if they realize that whereas clauses have no binding effect. We could have cut that down by about 90%. Okay, next up, amendment of contract for the Sustainability Director. Charlotte Binns is doing a lot of good work in this area, and there's still time left in the year, so we're in our fiscal year, so we just want to allow her to continue.
And she's bringing revenue too.
Yes,
Yeah.
she's also bringing in revenue grants. So, unless there are questions, the motion is resolved to amend contract 2023-28 for Charlotte Binns to increase the number of hours from 1,000 to 1,200. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next is a volunteer appointment. Resolved to appoint the following ad hoc volunteer committee member to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee with the term to expire December 2024. The member is Audra D. Nicola. So that's my motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, you want to give us the short story on the tax cert, Larry?
I can do
Oh,
it.
sorry.
So it covers, it's pretty much a legal challenging of the assessment. So it covers 3 years. The total is $76,482.65, and this first gets reviewed by the village attorney in conjunction with the town and their recommendation that this is the best option.
So this is not unlike the process that a homeowner might have gone through if they were, asking to be reassessed because they thought their valuation was too high.
Or a co-op.
This is a homeowner.
What?
Or a co-op complex.
Or a co-op
We use that
complex.
Right, this
Yeah,
is
it is-
homeowner, but
This is a homeowner.
but they took a slightly different path by filing a multi-year certiorari as opposed to
Yep.
a small claim, which just I'm not actually sure of the legal difference, but this was typically a larger settlement
Okay.
for a larger property.
And we have money budgeted to pay these, right? So it's.
Yeah, so we typically will budget $150,000 in the operating budget to cover these tax certs that come up throughout the year.
So it's somewhere in contingency.
It has its own line
Oh, it's
in
a
the
tax.
budget,
Okay,
yeah.
Got it. Okay. If there are no more questions, the resolution is, whereas petitions have been filed by Nora Capital LLC, hereinafter petitioner, challenging real property tax assessments on the Village of Irvington, the Town of Greenberg's assessment rolls with respect to the subject property for the 2019 through 2021 tax years with respect to parcel designated as parcel ID 2.40-10-10. Property owners Nora Capital LLC, it's 33 North Broadway, and tax years 2019 to 2021. Whereas petitioner's actions are now pending in Supreme Court, Westchester County, whereas the town and the petitioner have reached a mutually agreeable resolution, now therefore the village is authorized to effectuate a settlement commensurate with the following terms. and it indicates for 18, 19, and 20 tax years or assessment years, the original assessment was $8,173,200. The revised assessment is $5 million in 18, $5 million in 19, and $4,800,000 in 20, and that the Village of Irvington share of the refund is $76,482.65. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's a little after the fact, but a couple questions. Is 21, 22, are they pending, or they are automatically, well, they can't be automatically revised? Are those tax years still the subject of a dispute? Or maybe you don't know?
We're not sure.
I don't know.
Okay. The interesting, if you could just ask,
find out.
I mean, Greenberg should know, because I assume they led the settlement and then we just agreed, or?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Reports of board, standing committees, and officers.
No report this week.
John came to the theater commission meeting, thank you, right before the deer meeting, and I think it was, I hope you got a lot out of it.
I did.
I'm sure that the commission was very happy to see you there in the field of sports, so thank you, John, for coming tonight. Should I take him longer?
Want to skip over you and
No,
come
I'm
back?
good, I'm good. I just want to read
Great.
DPW's report. Okay, so for the Highway Department, DPW, they attended an invasive species workshop. They repaired the catch basin on North Broadway and St. Barnabas Church entrance, excavated and in the process of installing a new sidewalk at South Broadway and Sycamore Lane. It's a demo diesel Bravo sweeper. Demo
They
EV.
demonstrated.
Yes, they demoed those, okay.
Both diesel and electric.
And electric, and the electric, I guess, is coming up April 23rd. And like general cleanup and maintenance in West Clinton Avenue parking lot. And that's it. And John also attended the DEI meeting.
Yes, it was a busy week. Those were doubleheader meetings.
No report?
No
today?
report?
Nope.
I was going to report that the capital budget is underway. The requests were sent to the department heads. They're due back to myself and Larry April 19th. And then we plan to bring it to the board level in May.
And the package that they get, if you send something out, and this may go to some of John's questions, but is the historic package, or is it literally a blank slate where you say, what things do you need right now? Meaning, every year you've got something that you kind of roll forward because you know there are things, I don't know, I'll pick the water tank, for example, at some point, or some of the dams in Irvington that at some point will need some work. Which of those two approaches are you closest to, would you say?
So the packet that we give them covers the 23-24 budget, which was already approved, and then anything that was in last year's capital budget going forward. And then we ask them to kind of fill in year by year what like their capital plan is looking like, so we can kind of have like a long time plan to.
Got it. So I mean,
It gives them a chance to update.
yeah. I mean, this
There.
from memory, from whatever it was, 10, 12 years ago. You have something that is not only what we're dealing with in whatever it is, 24, 25, but several years beyond that will kind of show. And I know it's placeholders in many cases, but it shows sort of the longer term, larger plan.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay,
No report.
no report. Public comment, I guess. You want to do it again? We really liked your questions. Thank you. With that, I guess I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Oh, don't be too eager now. All in favor?
Aye.